The envoy from the citadel was young. His face was unlined, his clothes were clean, and his eyes held the dangerous, fragile light of an idea that had never been tested by reality. He stood before the War Council of the Dust Canyon Collective, in the echoing shell of a pre-collapse factory, and he spoke with the easy confidence of a man who had only ever read about hunger in history archives. "The fundamental flaw in our strategy," he said, his voice ringing with academic certainty, "is that we continue to operate as if humanity is designed for this. We are not. Our empathy, our communal instincts, our biological need for peace and stability, these are not weaknesses to be overcome. They are our core programming. We weren't built for perpetual war." He paused, letting his profound statement settle over the assembled captains and scouts, men and women with scorched skin and old scars. They stared back at him, their faces impassive, unreadable. But he wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to the woman who sat at the head of the rusted metal table, her hands resting calmly on its surface. Her name was Mara, and she was the reason the collective still existed. She didn't move, she just watched him, her gaze as patient and as final as erosion. After a long silence, when the young envoy began to look uncomfortable, she finally spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the cavernous space, cutting through the dust and the silence. "You say we weren't built for war," she said, her tone level, a statement of fact, not a question. "You may be right, but what we were built for no longer matters. All that matters is what we must become to survive." The envoy opened his mouth to reply, to launch into another well-rehearsed theory. She raised a single finger, and he fell silent. "You speak of biology," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "Let me tell you about mine. Let me tell you about my family." And then she began to list them. "My father, Eris, my mother, Ilera, my brother, Rorik, my sister, Lyra." She paused, and the envoy, trying to find common ground, offered a soft, sympathetic smile. "A strong family. They must be very proud of what you've—" "None of them are alive," Myra interrupted. The words were not delivered with sorrow. They were delivered like stones being dropped into a deep well, each one a measured, final truth. The envoy's smile vanished. The air in the room grew cold and heavy. "This is not a story about grief. This is a story about education. The most brutal, most effective education there is. The education written in blood and loss, the one that forges a human being into something the world cannot break." The envoy believed humans weren't built for war. Mara was about to show him that survival doesn't care about blueprints. It only cares about results. Her family didn't die in vain. They died teaching her the laws of this new world, and today you will learn those laws. You will learn the lessons they paid for with their lives so that you do not have to. Forget what you think you were built for. It's time to learn what you must become. The first law she learned came from her father. She called it the law of the unseen termite. Eris was an engineer from the old world, a brilliant man who saw the world in terms of stress points and structural integrity. When the collapse came, he was the one who designed their first fortress. He built walls of reinforced concrete and scrap steel that towered over the plains. He created interlocking fields of fire and kill zones so perfectly calculated that for 5 years, nothing touched them. Raiders came, shattered themselves against his designs, and fled. Mutated beasts howled at the gates and died on the spikes. Eris would stand on the parapet, look out at his creation, and say, "A good wall is the beginning and end of peace." He was proud, he was confident, and he was wrong. He believed the threat was loud. He believed it would announce itself with engines and shouts, that it would throw itself against the solid thing he had built. He spent all his time looking outward at the horizon. He never thought to look down at his feet. The threat that finally came wasn't a horde. It was a family of scavengers, no more than a dozen of them. They weren't warriors, they were diggers. People the collapse had pushed underground who had spent a generation clawing through the dirt and the dark. They called themselves the termites. They didn't assault the walls, they went under them. For 6 months they tunneled. They were patient, silent. They moved like geology, a slow, inexorable pressure. They didn't use loud machinery. They used hand tools, shoring up their tunnels with scrap, moving with the quiet discipline of creatures who knew the surface world was death. While Aris and his sentries scanned the empty horizon, the termites were hollowing out the very ground beneath their feet. The night they came up, it was a quiet Tuesday. They didn't emerge in the courtyard in a blaze of glory. They came up inside the storerooms, inside the generator shed, inside the infirmary. Silently, one by one. They didn't kill with guns, they used garrots and sharpened rebar. The slaughter was intimate and silent. Myra, just a teenager then, was woken by the sudden lack of sound. The hum of the generator, the background noise of her entire life, had stopped. She found her father not on the wall, but in his workshop, slumped over a new set of blueprints for a higher parapet. A thin wire was buried so deep in his neck it was almost invisible. He had died planning for the wrong war, defeated by a threat he never even considered. The lesson that burned itself into Mara's soul that night was this: complacency is the most dangerous enemy you will ever face. It's a poison you drink yourself, believing it is water. You build a wall around your career, your finances, your relationships, your skills. You achieve a level of success, a level of comfort, and you think, the wall is high enough, I am safe. You spend all your time watching for the big, loud, obvious threats, the market crash, the corporate takeover, the dramatic betrayal. You scan the horizon, but the real threat is rarely the barbarian at the gate. It's the termite in the foundation. It's the slow erosion of your discipline, the gradual decline in your standards, the bad habit you tolerate because it's small, the vital skill you stop practicing because you think you've mastered it, the slow, creeping obsolescence that you don't notice because you're too busy admiring the view from your wall. The envoy from the citadel, he lives behind a very high wall. He's forgotten that threats don't always knock. They seep, they burrow, they undermine. So what is the actionable truth here? It's an audit, a brutal, unflinching audit of your own foundations, right now. Stop looking at the horizon and look at your feet. Where have you become complacent? What small, quiet threat are you ignoring? Is it your health, slowly being eroded by poor choices you dismiss as no big deal? Is it a key skill in your industry that is slowly being replaced by a new technology you've dismissed as a fad? Is it a relationship where the foundation of trust is being eaten away by tiny, unspoken resentments? You must become your own termite. You must actively, relentlessly seek out the weaknesses in your own fortress. You must test your own walls. You don't wait for the generator to go silent. You regularly inspect the wiring. You don't just plan for the frontal assault. You plan for the infiltration. This isn't paranoia. This is anti-fragility. It is the brutal acknowledgement that the world is a dynamic, shifting system of threats, and the only way to remain standing is to be more dynamic, more shifting, more relentlessly self-critical than the forces arrayed against you. Her father, Aris, was a good man. He was a brilliant builder, but he loved his wall more than he respected the world's infinite capacity for new kinds of danger. He believed he had solved the problem of security. That was his fatal error. Security is not a fortress you build. It is a process you execute every single day. The law of the unseen termite states that what you don't see, what you don't look for, is what will kill you. So start looking. The second law came from her mother, Ilara. Myra called it the law of the severed limb. Ilara was the opposite of her husband. Where Aris saw systems and structures, Ilara saw people. She was the heart of their community, a healer with an almost supernatural empathy. She could calm a frightened child with a touch and talk a desperate man off a ledge. Her guiding principle was simple: everyone is worth saving. In the old world, this would have made her a saint. In the new world, it made her a liability. After the termites were driven out and the survivors regrouped, a wasting sickness swept through the refugee camps. It was fast and brutal. Ilara worked tirelessly, turning their new, smaller compound's main hall into a makeshift hospital. She established strict quarantine protocols. No one in, no one out. The healthy delivered food and water to a single airlock. It was working. The spread was slowing. They were winning. Then came the boy. He was from an outlying scavenger group, maybe 7 years old. He stumbled to their gate alone, feverish, delirious, crying for his mother. The guards on the wall, following Ilara's own orders, refused to open it. They offered him food and water through a chute, but they would not let him in. He was a vector, a walking biological weapon. It was a cold, hard, necessary calculation. Ilara heard his crying. She saw him through the gate's peephole, small and alone, and her core principle overrode her protocol. Her empathy overrode her logic. She argued with the guards, with Myra, with everyone. "He is a child," she kept saying. "We cannot leave him to die. What have we become if we do that?" In the end, she didn't just overrule the order. She went out herself. She brought the boy inside, carrying him in her own arms to an isolation cot. She treated him, soothed him, held his hand as the fever took him. He died 2 days later. And 3 days after that, Ilara herself developed a cough. The sickness she brought back inside the quarantine zone was like a fire in a dry forest. It tore through the infirmary, taking the recovering wounded first. Then it took the other medics. It took the very people they needed to fight it. Ilara, in her single, compassionate act, had sacrificed the entire medical capacity of their settlement for one child who was already doomed. She died a week later, not from the sickness, but from a self-inflicted wound after she watched the last of her patients die because of her choice. Her final note to Myra was just 5 words: "The heart is a poor general." The law of the severed limb is one of the most brutal truths of survival and leadership. Sometimes, to save the body, you must cut off a limb. Sometimes, to save the mission, you must sacrifice a piece of it. That limb could be a failing project, a toxic employee, a cherished belief, or even a relationship that is dragging you under. Your empathy, your loyalty, your compassion, these are powerful, essential human traits. But when they are not guided by cold, dispassionate logic, they become fatal. Your heart will tell you to give one more chance. Your heart will tell you to pour more resources into the failing venture because you've already invested so much. Your heart will tell you to keep the toxic person in your life because you remember the good times. Your heart will tell you to save the one crying boy at the gate. But the cold calculus of reality says that your resources are finite. Your energy is finite. Your time is finite. And every unit of these resources you pour into a lost cause is a unit you are stealing from a winning one. The envoy from the Citadel talks about empathy as a core human strength. He is right, but he does not understand that strength, like any weapon, must be aimed. Uncontrolled empathy is a fire hose whipping around a room, destroying as much as it saves. Controlled empathy is a surgeon's scalpel, applied precisely where it can do the most good and withheld when it would cause more harm. The actionable truth here is to learn the art of strategic detachment. It is not about becoming a monster. It is about becoming a surgeon. You must be able to look at a situation, a person, a project, and ask the brutal question: is this limb gangrenous? Is it threatening the rest of the body? And if the answer is yes, you must have the courage to make the cut. You do it cleanly, you do it quickly, and you do not look back. This will be the hardest thing you ever do. People will call you cruel, heartless, monstrous. They will not see the body you saved. They will only see the limb you sacrificed. Let them. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to be effective. Your job is to ensure the whole enterprise, your life, your company, your family, survives. Ilara died because she couldn't make that choice. She couldn't sacrifice the one to save the many. Her compassion was a beautiful, pure, and ultimately destructive force. Do not make her mistake. Learn to distinguish between the love that strengthens and the sentimentality that kills. Master your heart, or it will lead you and everyone who depends on you to the grave. The third law came from her brother, Rorik. She called it the law of the unthrown spear. Rorik was born into the new world. He never knew peace. He was fast, strong, and a natural survivor. He could track anything, fight with anything, and live on nothing. In a world of predators and prey, Rorik was a predator. He was Mara's right hand, the leader of their scouts, the sharp edge of their community's spear. He was the one they sent into the darkness, and he always came back, until he didn't. They were tracking a band of slavers, the Red Hand. These were not desperate scavengers. They were organized, vicious, and they preyed on weaker settlements. Rorik's team had cornered the leader in a ruined transit station. It was a perfect ambush. They had taken out his guards silently. The leader was alone, disarmed, backed into a corner. Rorik had him, a sharpened piece of rebar held to his throat. The fight was over. And then the slaver started to talk. He didn't beg for his life in a cowardly way. He was clever. He started talking about the new world, about how it forced men to do things they wouldn't have done before. He spoke of his own family, a wife and daughter he was trying to feed. He painted a picture of himself not as a monster, but as a man just like Rorik, a man making hard choices in a hard world. He humanized himself. And Rorik, for one critical second, hesitated. In that 1 second, he saw not a slaver, not a monster who burned villages and shackled children, but a man. In that 1 second, his killer instinct, honed over a decade of survival, was blunted by a flicker of misplaced empathy. He didn't lower the rebar, but the pressure lessened. His focus shifted. That was all the opening the slaver's hidden second-in-command needed. He had been playing dead nearby. A crossbow bolt from the shadows went through Rorik's neck. He fell without a sound. The slaver leader picked up Rorik's weapon, and his team slaughtered the rest of the scouts. The law of the unthrown spear is the law of the decisive moment. It states that the capacity for violence and the willingness to use it are not the same thing. You can be the strongest, fastest, most skilled person in the room, but if you hesitate at the moment of truth, you are already dead. Hesitation is the gap between knowing what you must do and doing it. And in that gap, your enemy lives and you die. The envoy from the Citadel would call Rorik's hesitation a flicker of his core programming, his humanity. He would see it as a tragic sign that we aren't built for this. Mara saw it for what it was, a fatal software error, a failure of programming. This world, your world, is not the transit station, but you face your own decisive moments every single day. The moment you need to speak up in a meeting and challenge a bad idea. The moment you need to walk away from a deal that feels wrong. The moment you need to fire a person who is poisoning your team. The moment you need to confront a friend or family member about their destructive behavior. These are your combat moments. They are the instances where your comfort, your fear of conflict, your desire to be liked, stand in direct opposition to the necessary, difficult action. And what do most people do? They hesitate, they soften the message, they delay the decision, they hope the problem resolves itself, they lower the spear, they think that by being less confrontational, they are being kind. They are not. They are being cowards. And their cowardice allows the problem to fester, to grow, to metastasize until it consumes them. The actionable truth is to train your hesitation protocol out of existence. This is not about becoming an aggressive or violent person. It is about cultivating absolute decisiveness. It is a form of mental training. First, you must pre-decide. Before you enter the transit station, the negotiation, the difficult conversation, the board meeting, you must define your non-negotiables. You must decide in the calm of your preparation what lines cannot be crossed and what action you will take when they are. This removes the need for in-the-moment calculation, which is where hesitation thrives. Second, you must practice with small things. When you decide to wake up at 5 a.m., you get up the instant the alarm rings. No snooze, no hesitation. When you decide to go to the gym after work, you go. You don't debate it, you execute. You are training your nervous system to follow a command from your conscious mind without delay. You are closing the gap. Rorik was a warrior. He was not a killer. A warrior trains for the fight. A killer trains for the moment of truth. The slaver was a killer. He understood that survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the one who acts without hesitation when the moment demands it. Rorik's humanity, his ability to see the man in the monster, was the weapon his enemy used against him. Do not let your softness be a weapon that can be turned against you. Cultivate the capacity for decisive, ruthless action. Not because you want to use it, but so that when you must use it, you do not hesitate. In the critical moments of your life, you are either the one with the spear or the one on the ground with a bolt in your neck. There is no third option. The fourth law came from her sister, Lyra. Myra called it the law of the sweet echo. Lyra was the youngest, the dreamer. She was born just as the old world was dying, and she clung to its ghost. While Myra and Rorik were learning to fight and build, Lyra was hoarding books and old data drives, trying to piece together a world of art, music, and peace. She was the repository of their hope, the one who reminded them of what they were fighting to one day rebuild. Hope was her specialty, and her doom. For over a year, she had been working on a powerful long-range radio, patching it together from scrap. One day, she picked up a signal. It was faint, cycling on a repeating loop, a calm, automated voice speaking of a sanctuary. "Come to Oakhaven," it said. "The plague is contained, the walls are secure, we have power, we have water, we are the future, come home." It gave coordinates, a location deep in the western mountains. It was everything they had ever dreamed of. It was a sweet echo of the world they had lost. Lyra was ecstatic. She saw it as the validation of all her faith. She played the recording for the council, her eyes shining. "This is it," she said. "This is our salvation." Mara was suspicious. It was too perfect, too clean. The signal was unencrypted, broadcasting for anyone to hear. It sounded like bait. She argued against it. "Hope is not a strategy," she warned. "A trap doesn't announce that it's a trap. It announces that it's a paradise." But Lyra's hope was infectious. The people, worn down by years of scraping by, were desperate to believe. The promise of Oakhaven was a drug, and they were eager for a fix. They accused Mara of being cynical, of being broken by the world. Lyra, her own sister, told her, "You've forgotten how to dream, Mara. We can't live like this forever." In the end, the council was split. Lyra, invoking the power of hope, convinced nearly a third of the settlement, 47 people, including some of their best farmers and technicians, to follow her. They packed their belongings, a small caravan of optimism, and set out for the mountains, following the sweet echo. They never came back. Months later, one of Myra's patrols found the caravan's remains at the foot of the mountains. It wasn't a battlefield, it was a processing yard. The people had been sorted like cattle. The strong were gone, taken by slavers. The weak were dead. The vehicles were stripped bare. The trap had been sprung. The Oakhaven signal was a lure, a spider's web woven from the most powerful bait in the world, the promise that the struggle is over. Lyra, the dreamer, had led her flock straight into the slaughterhouse. The law of the sweet echo is the brutal truth about hope. Hope is not inherently a virtue. Unexamined hope is one of the most dangerous forces in the universe. It is a hallucinogen that makes you see what you want to see, not what is actually there. It makes you lower your guard, ignore red flags, and walk willingly into disaster. The envoy from the Citadel would speak of the power of hope to inspire people, and it does, but it can also blind them. The modern world is filled with sweet echoes with promises of Oakhaven, the get-rich-quick scheme that promises wealth without work, the miracle cure that promises health without discipline, the political ideology that promises a utopia without sacrifice, the romantic partner who promises a perfect future while their present actions are a tapestry of red flags. These are all signals promising paradise, and people desperate to escape their own struggles flock to them. They invest their life savings, they sacrifice their health, they surrender their critical thinking, they follow the sweet echo right off a cliff. The actionable truth is not to abandon hope. It is to chain your hope to reality. Hope should be the fuel, not the map. Your map must be built from evidence, from data, from observation, from the brutal, unvarnished facts of the situation. You must learn to be a signal intelligence analyst for your own life. When you encounter a promising opportunity, a new job, an investment, a relationship, your first job is not to celebrate. It is to interrogate the signal. Who is broadcasting it? What is their motive? Is the signal clear and consistent, or is it vague and emotional? Is there any verifiable data to support the claims, or is it all just promises? Most importantly, who benefits if you believe this? You must actively search for disconfirming evidence. You must play the role of Mara, not Lyra. You must be the one in the room who asks the hard questions, who points out the inconsistencies, who says, "This sounds too good to be true." This will not make you popular. People love their sweet echoes. They will call you a pessimist, a cynic, a doomsayer. Let them. You are not trying to win a popularity contest. You are trying to survive and thrive in a world that is littered with the bones of optimists. Lyra died because she heard what she wanted to hear. She mistook a beautiful lie for a difficult truth. True, sustainable hope is not found in a magical signal from the mountains. It is forged in the dirt, day by day, through disciplined action, clear-eyed assessment, and the refusal to believe in shortcuts. Build your own Oakhaven. Don't go looking for someone else's. After Mara finished speaking of her sister, the factory was silent. The envoy stared at her, his intellectual certainty completely dismantled. He saw now that he wasn't in a debate. He was in a classroom, and the lesson was written in epitaphs. He finally found his voice, a quiet, humbled whisper. "So that's it. Your father, mother, brother, sister, all of them. Gone." He looked at her, at the leader forged from these losses. "How did you survive?" Mara leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "That is the final law," she said. "The law of the empty chair." "I survived," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense frequency, "because they died. I did not survive in spite of their deaths. I survived because of them. Each of them left an empty chair at the table, and I learned that my job was to sit in every single one of them." She stood up and began to pace, not with agitation, but with a terrible, contained energy. "When I plan our defenses, I sit in my father's chair. I don't just build the wall higher. I become the termite. I think from below. I think from within. I look for the threat that is silent, patient, and invisible. I honor his mistake by never repeating it." She paused by the makeshift infirmary door. "When a plague comes or a hard choice about resources must be made, I sit in my mother's chair. I feel the pull of my heart. I acknowledge the desire to save everyone. And then I do what she could not. I take out the surgeon's knife. I make the cold, hard, necessary cut. I honor her compassion by wielding it with brutal logic." She moved to the rack of weapons by the main door. When my scouts go into the dark, I sit in my brother's chair. I train them not just to be warriors, but to be killers. We drill the hesitation out of them. We practice for the moment of truth, the moment a human appeal is used as a weapon. We learn to see the monster, even when it wears a human face. I honor Rorik's hesitation by ensuring my people are incapable of it. Finally, she stood before a cluttered desk where a broken radio sat. And when a sweet promise comes over the horizon, when someone offers us an easy way out, a paradise for the low cost of our vigilance, I sit in my sister's chair. I let myself feel the pull of that hope, and then I chain it to the ground. I demand proof. I demand data. I dissect the signal for the lie I know is hidden within it. I honor Lyra's dream by refusing to be seduced by false ones. She returned to the head of the table and stood behind her own empty chair. You see, they are not gone. They are here. They are my counsel. Their ghosts are my advisors. Their failures are my doctrine. I did not simply mourn them and move on. I absorbed them. I integrated their fatal errors into my own operating system. I became the wall builder who thinks like a termite, the healer who thinks like a general, the warrior who thinks like a killer, and the dreamer who thinks like a code breaker. I am the culmination of their mistakes. The law of the empty chair is the ultimate truth of transformation. True strength is not born from victory. It is forged in the analysis of failure. Your failures, the failures of those you have seen fall. Every setback, every loss, every mistake is a lesson paid for in the currency of pain. To let that lesson go unlearned is the ultimate waste. You have empty chairs in your life, the failed business, the relationship that ended in disaster, the job you were fired from, the moment you hesitated and lost, the time you trusted a lie because it was beautiful. Do not just put a flower on those graves and walk away. Go back, sit in the chair, relive the failure not with shame or regret, but with the cold, detached eye of a strategist. Extract the lesson, write it down, turn it into a personal law. This is the alchemy of resilience. This is how you turn lead into gold. You don't just recover from your wounds, you study the scars. You learn the precise angle of the blade that made them. You learn to never leave that opening again. The envoy from the Citadel said humans weren't built for war. He was looking at the original blueprint, the one that came with hope and empathy and a biological need for peace. He was right. But he failed to understand that we are not finished products. We are adaptable. We are programmable. Life, especially a life of struggle, is a constant process of rewriting our own code. You are not what you were built for. You are what you have survived. The question is, have you learned from it? So look at your life. Look at the ghosts of your past failures. Stop running from them. Stop being ashamed of them. Invite them to the table. Give each one a chair. Let your father's complacency teach you vigilance. Let your mother's misplaced heart teach you strategy. Let your brother's hesitation teach you decisiveness. Let your sister's false hope teach you to ground your dreams in reality. Become the sum of all their lessons. Forge yourself in the fires that consumed them. This is the brutal, honest, and powerful path to becoming unstoppable. It is not about destroying weakness. It is about understanding the anatomy of that weakness so completely that you render it inert. It is about transforming every loss into a law, every failure into a fortress. You weren't built for the world you find yourself in. None of us were. Good. The blueprint was flawed anyway. Now you get to build something better, something stronger, something the world cannot break. The work starts now. Sit in the empty chairs, learn the laws, and become the weapon you were meant to be.